Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of Spark Intention. I am your host, Jenna Monaco. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. If you're returning, welcome. Thank you so much for coming back. Today we have a returning guest, Shaun Morgan, lead singer of Seether. And I am a huge fan of Seether, and they have a new album out, and I will be butchering the name of it again because it's in Latin. It's actually, we get into the title and the purpose behind the title. It is amazing. So it's called Si Vis Pacem Parabellum. I probably butchered that again. Anyway, that is the title of the new album, and it means if you want peace, prepare for war. And we get into it. We get into what that literally meant for the album, but then also just kind of my interpretation of that as far as it goes within your own personal journey as a human being on this earth, and your mind. So anyway, yes, I took it into a literary kind of way, but I think it's just such an amazing, I was so inspired by this conversation because I'm just really, I'm a fan of Seether, and I'm also just really inspired by Shaun and his work, and he gives so much back, and he's such an advocate for mental health, and he shares so much in his words and his lyrics about mental health, and it's amazing because I think when we're going through our mental health journey, part of the worst part of it is the isolation and feeling so alone. And I feel like his music really, at least for me on my journey, especially in high school, and some of the worst times of my life where I just felt so alone, music was such a key to not feeling so isolated. And like, I wasn't the only one feeling that much pain. So anyway, I just have a lot of admiration for Shaun and his work. And so let's get into the episode. Let's just dive in. I don't have much more to say on it in the moment because I think that the episode just speaks for itself. So let's just dive in, enjoy this interview, enjoy this conversation with lead singer of Seether, Shaun Morgan.
All right. Thank you, Shaun, for being on the podcast again. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I've been listening actually to your latest album. It's very nostalgic for me. So I don't think I told you this before, but I used to listen to Seether all the time in high school, and it got me through some really, really dark times in my life. And I just never would have thought it'd be like sitting down speaking with you, let alone twice. But it just brought back some like really good nostalgia for me to hear the band and hear your voice and in a different way, in different lyrics. But I have my whole own story about this album that I have made up in my head. But I would love to I'd love to hear just a little bit from you about how this album came together for you, what your process was, all of that good juicy stuff.
Well, basically, we had finished a pretty hard touring year. 2018 was pretty rough. It was a lot of international travel, but it was basically bouncing between continents within the space of a couple of weeks, a lot of time zones, and we were all kind of burned out. So when I got home in November of 2018, I basically was completely done with music for a while. And I wasn't intending on starting to write for this album until sometime in the middle of 2019, but I ended up starting probably in the end of January, beginning of February of 2019. I started coming up here, and I would just start playing around, and I just really didn't have any focus or any drive, but I was enjoying just making music for the fun of it. And then as I started continuing, I realized, okay, there's more and more of a it's heading more towards this type of sound. It was definitely being towards a more like you say, well for me it's also nostalgic in a sense that it's kind of like our older sound. It's a little bit more driving and a little bit heavier. a little bit more emotional, and it certainly is presented in a form where it's supposed to be a little bit more visceral sounding than a gleaming, shiny pop sounding album, which I think in the past we've had with other producers and mixers trying to push us in a certain direction. So, and I just kept writing, and I kept going until I had about 45 or 50 ideas, and then I said, okay, that's enough. And then I concentrated it down to what I thought the ones that inspired me the most, which ended up being 21 songs. And then those 21 songs were going to be cut down to 13 for the album, but I couldn't decide which of the 21 should be thrown away. So we basically recorded the entire 21 song pile, and we then managed to put 13 on, add 3 for a bonus track, and then there's another 5 that will hopefully release probably sometime next year, so that they won't go missing, they won't go unheard. And yeah, there's no real like motivation. There's no real force that drives me to write the songs. It's just that when it comes to lyrics, then there's a different story. When it's music, it's just I just want to write stuff that makes me feel good, that I want to hear, that I think is interesting and fun to play. And once I've achieved that, then I'm happy with it. Then I sort of focus on the lyrics. And then when it comes to lyrics, it's really what emotion drives the music. So if the music is kind of feeling a little bit more melancholy, then the lyrics tend to sort of follow the same direction. Whereas if it's a little bit more aggressive, then obviously the lyrics come out more aggressive and more angry. And yeah, that's really what it is. And at the end of it, you try and make it as cohesive as possible. But I think when I'm writing lyrics at the same time for say 21 songs, subconsciously they all tie in somehow with themes and emotions and thoughts, because you're in that one block of time. It's not like I didn't write lyrics in January and then more lyrics in March and then more lyrics in December. I wrote them all in December. So that kind of ties them together somehow as well, because you're still finishing up a thought on one song, but then that thought is still subconsciously, there's a little bit of that string still in there. So when you write the next one, I think it does weave its way through this sort of subconscious theme as you go. But I figure, with this one lyrically, I wanted to take more time with it, because I've normally have been quite, I don't know if it's I've allowed my subconscious stream to take over when it comes to lyrics. So when I have a demo, often it'll be like a garbled noise, or it'll be a melody, or there'll be some words here and there that I latch onto that I think fit well into the song. But I wait until. So I have an idea of syllables, and I have an idea of melody, and I have an idea of perhaps a rhyming word that will start the end of the first sentence. And then I'll try and figure it out as I go. But I'll wait until I have about, it's time to do the vocals, and they'll go, okay, you have to write some lyrics. I'm like, well, okay. So I'll run into the room next door, and I'll quickly scratch something out, and I'll go into the vocal booth, and I'll sing them. And it was effective for the longest time, because I found that doing it that way, it was cool, because I allowed something else to take over the thought process, and I was saying things that I didn't understand I was saying at the time. But if I listen back to some lyrics now, I'm like, holy cow, that was a little bit either aggressive, or was a little bit too exposing, or perhaps came across slightly differently to what I originally intended. But this one, I felt like I needed to really honor the music as much as hard as I'd worked on the music throughout the period of a year. I didn't want to just do the same thing with the lyrics. So I figured I would take more time, and I really sat down and thought about them, and analyzed them, and went back and made a bunch of changes, and really wanted to get them to a point where it was perhaps slightly different to what I normally do, but maybe in my mind it was refining what I normally do, and maybe taking a closer look at it and getting it to a stronger place, or a better place, or a better presentation of what I'm thinking and what I'm trying to say, rather than just going, okay, cool, I'm supposed to scratch something out and scribble it out and run into the vocal booth and then sing it. And I know I'm rambling, but the reason why I used to do that as well is I used to have it in my head that it was kind of cool that if you get into the vocal booth and you don't really know your lyrics yet, there's a kind of a vulnerability to them. So you learn it as you go. And so you present it slightly differently each time until you sort of fall into what the final vocal line is going to be. But that just means it takes me more time in the studio. You know what I mean? So kind of by writing the lyrics out beforehand and really thinking about them and getting familiar with them, when I went in to do the vocals this time, it was really just, okay, now I can sing these with confidence, maybe once, twice, 3 times, and then the takes are done. So it's in this day and age, really, it's all about getting albums done as fast and as cheaply as possible.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. But I love so much of what you said, because I think, oh my God, there's so much. But okay, the first thing was just that idea of bringing back like fun to
Mm-hmm.
your process, because I think, especially when as an artist making something your career, it's like you're doing what you love, and there is pressure to either get the book out, or get the get the song out, or get the whatever it is that you're doing, whatever medium you're working in, and it kind of blocks some of that creative flow that like you get into,
Right.
and when you're doing it just for fun.
Yeah.
And also I love that you were able to play with a sound that you wanted to do. I think, there is always pressure, even so I can only speak from a writer's perspective because that's what I do, but there is that pressure to change the character, change the sound, or change this, change that to what people, and so it has a certain potency to it, to be able to come out as an artist and be like, no, this is what I wanted to do, and take it or leave it.
Well, it also, there's a lot to be said for our label as well, because the previous label, there were really hard deadlines, and they were really quite strict about them. And if you exceed a deadline, there's quite a serious price to pay for that. Where with this one, first of all, I don't have anybody breathing over my shoulder. I don't have any A&R guys telling me what to write, how to write. I can't write. It needs to be a certain type of sound or direction. Really, they trust me enough that they say, cool, when you're done, just send us the music, and I guess we'll make an album. They've never ever complained about anything. There's been one note from the A&R guy just because he thought it was too similar to a different song. I changed a single note on a song on the last album, but really, other than that, I hand them the songs and they go, cool, that's great. Let's go out and record an album. So that gives me the freedom too to really have fun with it, because when I was on the previous label, I didn't really enjoy it as much, because I spent most of the time sending them songs that I thought were great songs, and they would tell me I didn't know what I was doing. So songs like Country Song, Fine Again, Rise Above This, Fake It, any of those songs, they were telling me that they were terrible songs, and they would tell me that I needed to find. And really, I think the motivation from the A&R guy, his point was, he was a co-writer on some album that was mildly successful, so he was trying to inject himself into the process, right? So he was trying to make himself. Did I disappear? Can you see me still? Here we go. Oh, something's happened. You know what it is? It's just a cheap camera. That's why. I don't know. Sorry.
That's okay.
So I was going back to the A&R guy at the previous label had written on this Daughtry. I think it was a Chris Daughtry album, and he was one of like 11 or 12 writers. And the song did really well, and it kind of put Daughtry on the map after the American Idol thing. Mm-hmm. And so he got it in his head that he was this big shot songwriter, and he spent the next decade telling me that I was crap. And that kind of got me to a point where I often wanted to just quit. I didn't want to write music anymore. I would do it because it was my job, and at this point I was kind of like, well, look, what else am I going to do with my life? You know what I mean? I've really focused all my energy for my entire life on this one thing. Why am I now going to find something else? I'll just rather weather the fact that this guy thinks I don't know how to write music, and I'll be miserable doing it, and I'll just do whatever they tell me, and I'll go to the producer that they want me to use, and I'll let the guy change my music as much as he wants, because I have no say anymore. And I kind of felt pretty helpless for a while, that it was just, I was just creating sort of the foundation of it, and then everything was it was taken away from me, and it felt like you're on a runaway train with no brakes, and somebody's just hitting the accelerator, and all you got to do is hang on. So what's fun about it now again is, and on the last album I had fun too, because for the first time there was no time crunch that was necessary. I mean, they set a guideline, but they're not going to enforce it in any way. And there's no direction, there's no directives to follow. It's just do what I do, and when I'm done, everyone's great with it. And then the other thing was not having a producer come in and say, all right, okay, thanks so much, I'm going to take it from here. That was a big risk on the last album, but on this one, it was just great. It was so much fun, because I felt like I had proven myself on the previous album, because I hired the right guy to help me get the sound that I was hearing in my head, and so he came in and helped me. Last time he helped me on this new one, and Corey, one of the new guitarists in our band, did as well. But it's so much more fun and so much more creative when you are the one driving, steering the ship kind of thing. Because I just recently actually got all of our old demos from like 1999 onwards. And most recently I was listening to some of the demos from the albums that we did with American producers. And I was a little bit upset at one point because I felt like if I go back to some of my demos, I really like the way they were presented. I mean, sure, you can make them sound better because it's not real drums. It's not, guitars and amps and things. It's all digital stuff. And it is a way to create sort of, the blueprint for an album version. But to totally take those songs that I thought were in their essence, in their structure and in their presentation that I thought were really great, and just change it for the sake of changing it because that means you can say you did something that earns you all of this money. That kind of, it was really frustrating. So I'm glad that I don't have that issue anymore now that I'm producing the albums myself, because it really does take it away from if something changes, it's because I want it to change, not because it's changed because somebody else is saying, hey man, excuse me, if someone's saying, you need to change this because I'm the producer and I know more than you and you need to do this because it's going to make this song so much better. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't make a difference. Changing one chord here and there's not going to make the song a better or worse song. It might make it more interesting for somebody who's I don't know, like a music theorist or a music scholar or something. But I mean, for the average fan, for the average person listening to music, it's about the emotion that it evokes from you, and then the response that you get, and the comfort that you get from it. You know what I mean? It's like I listen to music, different bands for different reasons. There's some bands that I listen to when I'm unhappy and I need to be comforted. There's other bands I listen to and it's like, let's go out and have a good time. You want to get fired up before we say, for example, before we play a show. And there's other bands you just want to listen to just because they make you feel good. And it's just fun to listen to. So, but they all get a response out of me on the emotional level. Anyway, so that's really what it is. And when the music for me is fun to create, it's so much more satisfying when it doesn't feel like, okay, cool. What time is it? We got 3 weeks left. So we have to present an album. It's kind of like when you say you're a writer, if you have an editor and they give you a deadline, it's something that makes you feel stressed. And some people respond well under that stress. And at times at times it's like, I've got how much, let's do this. And I'll write something. And again, it's sort of like, it's almost a reflexive response, and it's almost like like your adrenal response, right? Where it's fight or flight, and you go, I'm going to fight for this. You get it done, and you present everything, but you still don't feel like you've accomplished it the way you want to because you did it for the sake of finishing something in time. And there's guys that'll paint a painting, and it'll take them 10 years, and they're still not done. Because sometimes it's always evolving, and other times you'll know when it's done, and there should never be a time limit on it. So that's the other great thing is when I have this time and I have all the time in the world really to write music, they'll say, hey, we want you in the studio by, September or October. I'm like, well, I'm not close to that. Then they're okay, cool. Well, just let us know. That removes all of that sort of, certainly the anxiety of finishing, right? And anxiety is brutal. So when you have none of those restraints, it's such a freeing and liberating experience that, and then knowing at the end of the day that whatever you've done, look, there'll be criticism if it's necessary, but really nobody's criticizing for the sake of criticizing so they can get a paycheck. You know what I mean? So they're not just saying, oh, well, I need to make these couple of changes and then, oh, thanks, I'll take 6 figures. Have a good day. And I'm not against producers. And I think that they have a time and place, but I think that I've learned so much from these guys in the past that where I had pressure on myself on the last album because I was taking over that role. On this one, I didn't. So again, there was another part of it that was fun about it, and it was makes the creative process, because I know at the end of the day, it's gonna be presented almost exactly as I heard it in my head, because there's nobody else saying, well, hey, I think we should change this little thing here, and it's like, well, to you that's a small thing. To me, that might be a monumental change, but you don't feel like you have the right to interject and say, hey, I don't like what this is doing. I don't like where this is going. I don't like how I'm feeling. You have all of these. You just have to bottle it up and walk out and say, thanks so much, man. I'm honored to have been in your presence. And then you walk out and you have all of these regrets. And you have albums out there that you don't like the mix of, and you don't like certain guitar parts, and you don't like certain elements of a song, for example. And it's all because I didn't ever feel like I had the right to say, hey, I know you're a super famous guy who does super big albums, and you've worked with much bigger names than me, and I should sit here and respect everything you say as gospel, but I don't like the way this is going. And I never had that. I never had the courage to do that. So that's another thing that again, it's about all of this, the creative freedom and the fun of it, and really having, because again, you get to a point where, and I'm not over exaggerating when I get to a point where you want to just completely quit and do something else, because it's just, when it becomes only a job, then it's no longer something I want to do. It's still my job, obviously, but for the most part, it's fun. It's fun to play shows. It's not fun to tour for 6 months at a time before you go home. But it's fun to do 3 or 4 weeks and then go home for a couple of weeks. So that it's all about maintaining the enthusiasm for it. Because if you put us through the ringer, like, and when we were younger, you start off as a baby band and they say, cool, you guys go out on tour. And the first thing you've got 25 dates in a row, no days off. And sure, it's only 30-minute sets, but you've got 25 days. Then you have 1 day off. Then you go into another 19-day block and you have 1 day off. Then you do another 20 days. And it's fine because you're 22 years old and you were invincible. And it's super fun. And there's booze is flowing like waterfalls. And it's you're living the dream because you finally you signed and you're an American. It's great. But quickly, as the years go by, you start burning out faster because you go, okay, cool. 3 weeks is great, but I don't want to play every single night of the week for this month. I'd like to play, 4 shows a week, five at a stretch. So at least we have a couple of days off so we can, recharge. And again, we're also all older now, but it's important to approach that whole thing so smartly, because if you send a band out, and we've done this, we were one of the road dogs, kind of like the Seven Dust guys, but you get to a point where it's just not fun anymore. It's like, take your favorite meal. Let's say your favorite meal is pizza, and you say every night you have pizza, and you can put different stuff on pizza. You can take stuff off the pizza and remix the pizza and put other stuff on the pizza. It's still pizza. So every single, by the second weekend, you're going, man, I don't ever want to see a pizza in my life again. So you have to deal with that too. So it's a really interesting thing, because you at some parts of a tour, depending on how long it's into it or how close to the end of it is, you love and loathe equally your job, and sometimes loathe it even more because you start realizing what it's restricting you from. So it's restricting you from time to yourself, your family, your own bed, your own house, your own dog. You're not seeing any of your family. It's restricting you from sleep. It's restricting you from just being able to be a normal human being going to the grocery store. So you start looking at it that way. When you start, it's like, woohoo, let's go. It's pumped. Play guitar and jump around on stage, and this is super fun. So it depends. But there's that evolution that happens that towards the end of it, it's no longer fun. And I guess really the thing that stuck with me throughout this whole this diatribe here is that it's the fun aspect that's back, and that's difficult to achieve after 20 years, where you still think, I'm still having fun doing this. And if anyone says they are, I don't believe them. Unless, you can still have fun, and maybe some guys do, but everybody at some point goes, man, what am I doing with my life? Do I still love this? Do I still want to be doing this? Do I still want to be, touring year in and year out, and kind of just, it's kind of a fun Groundhog Day, you know what I mean? Yeah. But again, it's the same thing. It's like as if you lived, because you like you say, people say, what's Europe like? It's like, I know what the venues in Europe look like, and I know what some alleys look like, and I know what some coffee shop. I don't know what Europe looks like because I've been through it in a bus. Right. You know what I mean? I've seen some festivals that are out in the field. They've got fields. I've never. It's like you're in all of these cool, beautiful places, but you never actually get to experience them. So yeah, I don't even know how I turned that fun in music into how European touring doesn't actually include Europe. But
glad you did though. I'm so glad you did though, because I think you're bringing up a really important point that I talk to my clients often about. And then I want to get into another aside from that, but just like, if it just becomes a job, like you can just go to a 9-to-5 at that point. So like you have to find the balance for you of like what works for you and what doesn't. And that takes time to understand yourself and understand what you need and what you want. But if you're just doing it for the paycheck at that point, you can do anything for just a paycheck. And then your passion has, your little light of passion has kind of gone out. And
Exactly.
that's tough. That's a tough place to be, because, we don't know where, I mean, as far as creators go, it's like, I do this because it lights me up. And when you don't have that, that's a really dark place to be.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I used to think, for me, that one of the highlights of this business, of my job, was playing shows.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I haven't been able to play shows in so long, and I haven't been on tour, and my mindset was, that was the thing. So when we were about to go on tour, we were supposed to start in May.
Wow.
And there's a whole process that happens there. You can't just get on a bus, flip a switch, and now you're a completely different lifestyle. You have to work up, you have to mentally figure it out, and you have to prepare yourself for it. Because you have to say goodbyes, and you have to leave the people that you love at home. You have to leave just regular routine at home. You have to leave you're going to the store, all of these things. So I was all set and good to go, and then everything got ripped out underneath us, and it was devastating. So I figured, okay, well, now what are we going to do with ourselves? I mean, at first we thought it was going to be a couple of months. We said, fine, that's just a bit of a delay. And then as the year progressed, it was like, oh no, now it might be, they're talking about 2021, maybe in the fall, maybe even 2022, and we'll start touring. I know people are booking shows now, but that's not necessarily guaranteed. So it's made me realize that, yes, I love to play live, but I really, really enjoy the creative side of it. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of conflicted at the moment as well. Maybe it's because it's been so long since I've played a live show that I forgot really. Yeah, we did a stream a couple months back, but it's not the same experience as playing to a crowd, right? So It's been so long. Maybe I don't realize how much I miss it. But at this point in time, we're almost in November. And we haven't played a single show since October of last year, and then before that was November of 2018. So it's been a very long time, and I kind of feel like I'm okay with that right now. I'm really enjoying my wife, my kid. I'm really enjoying seeing her grow up and her, watching her, from the start of a pandemic till 8 months later. It seems like, I think we're at this point. Mm-hmm. She's exploded into this cool little kid. She's got all these things to say and all of these ideas, and she has dreams now about monkeys and pirates fighting swords. And it's just this amazing thing. And I would have missed all of that had I been on tour. So that is the conflict as well. So it's almost, that's something to consider and to consider seriously is which one is the one that gives me the most joy, really. I sound like Maria Kondo now. It sparks my most joy. But it's important to think, okay, because mentally I don't do well away from home. So that's why a lot of us will do. I used to do a lot of drugs, but I don't do anymore. But you will do a lot of drinking, and even then it's not constructive, but it's a coping mechanism. It's the whole idea of, it's very difficult for some guys to sober up on the road. And our drummer has been sober for, I think, 17 years now. So he did it, and it was a long process for him. Mm-hmm. And I know it was very difficult in the beginning, and I think now he just doesn't care about what goes on around him. But I have been sober before, and I've toured sober, but then it's kind of like, really, it's like embarrassing that I can go from not drinking for a year and a half, feeling great, to suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I'm gonna just have a couple drinks. I'm an adult, I can handle this, and then it's back into like drinking. Mm-hmm. During this time, it's been pretty heavy, and it's like, it's just because now it's because of depression and feeling of helplessness and feeling of anxiety all the time, and what does my life look like from here on out? Because I mean, I'm already starting to set my mind as to, okay, there's going to be another year of not touring, because there's a very real possibility that happens. So I need to find something else to do, and that something else may become more important down the line. I don't know. You know what I mean? And this might become sort of a more tertiary vocation, if you will. But I just, when I turned 40, it was just like something in me flipped, and I became really, really, really conscious of my mortality. I became, I was a guy who would do mountains of drugs, and now I don't even like taking aspirin. It's like, it was this real, it was like some sort of switch flipped in my head. And I think that was just after we'd finished touring. So, that gives me a whole other kind of fear of touring now, because the problem is it kind of made me fearful of a lot of things.
Right.
And I think maybe because I lived so long without being in fear of anything, I've had a realization that, geez, if I look back on my life, there's a timeline where there's many occasions where I shouldn't have woken up, or I shouldn't have still been here because of what I'd put myself through. So I think that, coupled with turning 40, coupled with having the family, it's all just sort of this perfect storm of, okay, do I still really want to do this? And clearly I do, because I love the new album, and I'm really proud of the music, and I really enjoyed writing that stuff, and I really, really worked really hard on it to make it as good as I possibly could. So I do still enjoy that side of it. It's now the toss-up is do I still enjoy the playing side of it as much? And I'm not sure how that feels yet, because I don't have the opportunity to test out the theory, right? So I couldn't test it out if I wanted to. The best I could do these days is they offer you some pennies to go play at a drive-in movie theater, and you play to 300 cars and nobody's allowed to get out, and I guess they honk at you. I don't know, which doesn't seem like a plausible.
Wave out the window.
Yeah.
The rock and roll sign.
So it's a strange time, and it's just, it really leaves you open to reevaluating all of your, well, really your life in general, and certainly not, there's no, again, if there was a hard and fast, okay, cool, May next year, June next year, July even, it's back on, game on, everybody's out there like a stampede, and we're going to go play some shows. But that's not even, even now they tentatively offering shows, and they're saying, look, this is just in case, we're just trying to keep some placeholders in place. So there's still no actual guarantee, and there's no real, feeling of comfort that knowing that I'm going to be back at work, quote unquote, anytime soon. So that brings you, it's just, I've spent a lot of time this year feeling kind of useless and hopeless and depressed as hell, which is not just, and I think on that, you got to touch on that and say, people think that when you say depression, it's just that you're just sad, but it's not. I mean, anyone who's had it will tell you it's something way worse than that. Yeah. It's like when you don't even want to get out of bed, when you don't even bother to shower for a week, when you don't even eat because it's too much work, when you don't, all you want to, you wait until a certain time, it's at 6 o'clock. Oh, cool. Let me get drunk again. It's like, it's not like, oh, I'm just sad. I can go listen to a happy song and I'll feel better. It's an actual, and for me, it's been since I was a kid, but normally I manage it through playing, music would help me. So it was like, you can get out of dark times with music, you can get out of dark times, but with even playing shows, especially if it's early on in a tour and it's fresh with the guys and everyone's happy and excited, but that's all gone. So it's kind of been, and then when you're so listless that something that you would normally find joy in just doesn't even elicit a response anymore. It's like, I don't want to read a book. I love this book. I don't even care. Video games. I don't care. Movies. I don't care. And even sitting in the living room and the kid is trying to talk to you, and you just almost like you're not there sometimes. And that's what it is, really. Yeah. And I think sometimes for people that's difficult to understand or fathom if they've never really experienced that, and certainly for themselves. But I know I'm a difficult person to live with in this phase because I'm just not who I normally am, and it's very difficult for me to get out of it. And there are options that I see therapists, and I've been prescribed medication and stuff. But it doesn't always mean that all of that helps. It's like, I think a lot of my happiness comes from knowing that, would have been knowing that I had some kind of worth. And that really, the worth was, sure, I have worth to my family, and I have worth to the girls and then to the dog because I feed him and I have worth to fans, but it just feels like I have no worth if most of my worth has always come from playing shows to people. Like I did a couple of shows sitting right here. I did a couple of acoustic things and I played a song and there was no response. I'm not reading comments because I just don't like to engage in that side of it. And then I answered some questions and then it was really awkward and I was singing another song and then it's like, I was so nervous. I was sweating. My shirt was drenched when I was done after like 25 minutes of this. Yeah. I felt so vulnerable. I felt so alone. I felt so isolated from everything and everyone that I just stopped doing them. I did it twice. And I was like, the second time I did it, it took me about an hour and a half to stop shaking from the adrenaline that was in my system. And it's just something that I couldn't handle. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. it's just a weird place to be. And I don't know that touring equals happiness necessarily, but it certainly would be. Again, there's a bunch of theories that I have that I can't test out yet. But once we can play again, I think, and so we've also changed the way we tour now. We don't leave for 5 or 6 months at a time anymore. We will leave for the weekend and come back on like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The kind of like the country artist, which I think is great, because you at least get some home time once a week. And that, as far as keeping you in the game mentally, is very important, because three of us have kids out of the four. Dale keeps threatening us with a good time, but he still hasn't had a kid yet. But he doesn't quite understand that sense of it yet, But the three of us that are, we all leave kids behind and wives, and it becomes more difficult, especially the more time you've spent with them. You think that sometimes, like, oh, I've been here for a year. It's time to go, man. We're sick of each other. Let's go. I need to be away. But it's been the opposite. And I don't know. It's just been a weird time, really, in general. It's been tough.
And it sounds too like just everything for you has transitioned from how you write music to now, like just the way that you're doing music, and the way that now you're thinking about performing, or like how that's going to look for you. Like everything has like kind of shifted. And I also really love that you chose that specific quote for the new album. So I'm going to see if I can say it right. Civis Pacem Parabellum.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah, okay. Like that's not my strong suit. So
no, it's all good. It's all good.
But I love that saying for the listeners, because I had to look it up. But it was it's if you want peace, prepare for war. Right? And so in my mind, in my story, in my writer's brain, I was like, wow, that is so poetic, because I was just thinking, like, when you think of like mental health struggle, it's like, if you want peace of mind, like you're at war with yourself, like to get there.
Right.
At least that's been my story. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking like, wow, like that quote for that. And you talk about a lot of that in the lyrics. So what I did was I've never done this before, but I listened to the music and read the lyrics at the same time, which was really cool, because I felt like I just got through a huge book of poetry, and it was really cool. But you talk a lot about like that struggle of mental health, and that struggle of like worth and worthiness, and like where that comes from. Like, and as you were sharing, it was just like that reminder that like worth really comes from like inside ourselves, and like how we perceive ourselves. And I just, it was just like all of that, like piecing together in my head as you're speaking. And I'm like, this is so cool.
Yeah, it's. I mean, a lot of the therapy that I do, we deal with. It's kind of like the real dig way back into the past type stuff, and really, I'm being provided with an arsenal of tools which could be considered weapons against, anxiety, depression, fear, all of those, like the breathing techniques and the mental pictures that you can make, and the situations you can put yourself in to calm yourself down. So I think all of those become viable in my mind as the quiver, arrows in the quiver kind of idea against a breakdown, because it's not easy when you feel a panic attack coming on to stave it off, and it's like, it's coming. It's going to suck, but if you know some things, if you have some little tools that you can use, you can slow it or diminish it, or sometimes beat it. You know what I mean? And you can certainly, deal with it a lot better than you used to. So that's kind of, that was one of the aspects of it too. Certainly, the title just seemed to me to make a lot of sense as far as the world in general. Society, the lack of community, really feeling that I don't really feel like we have community spirit anymore, really, in some places. The way people treat each other on social media, for example, I think is disgusting. I think it's it's like the gladiators arena. And
it is.
and you have to go in there and you're outnumbered, and it just feels like, and it's a bunch of baying hyenas that are crying for blood. I kind of just find it. I think that all of these sort of really addictive elements have been introduced into society without anybody realizing their level of addictiveness. And you are giving people hits of serotonin or different types of endorphins throughout the day when they get a like or a thumbs up, and they know this, and they've said that they knew that this was going to be addictive, and they didn't care because I'm a billionaire now, so ha ha. It's so irresponsible. Yet it's constantly evolving as well to be more and more invasive and more personal. And I feel like that's a war we're fighting too. Is just to remain individuals and to be able to think for yourself and to be able to speak for yourself without repercussion, unless it's something that deserves repercussion. But to have a thought or an idea that differs from somebody else's used to be fine. It used to be totally all right to not think like somebody else, and you could still get along with each other because civility was a thing. That's all gone now too. So it's like, and I'm very happy that I don't have any of the social media platforms on a personal level, because I dabbled back in the day and I didn't do very well. So I decided, look, I need to get out of here because I'm either gonna get myself in trouble or I'm just riling myself up because I take the bait too often. So you take the bait, you get all riled up, you think you type back some haughty, smart response, and yet all you're doing at the end of the day is just engaging with somebody that it doesn't. This person's not going to matter tomorrow. This person's not going to matter next week. This argument's not going to matter a year from now. So really, there's no point in putting any kind of effort into it. So I got rid of those, and I've never been. Well, I'm certainly happier without having them. We have the band socials, obviously, because it's a powerful marketing tool. And I think that's the thing. It's such a double-edged sword for me, because on one hand, I hate social media with an absolute passion. And I hate its addictiveness and how it's poisoning the minds of our children and how it's poisoning just generally society as a whole. But then on the other hand, they've made themselves so integral a part of our everyday lives that you have no choice but to partake in their use. So it's like they are the scummiest things on the planet because they've made themselves like indispensable, really. And yet they have the power to change what we see and think and say across the spectrum, So it's a horribly terrifying situation that we find ourselves in. And I think that's another battle that lies ahead is, we are just products now at this point. We've become products that have a certain monetary value, and adverts get pushed out to you, and then these other people get really rich off of you. And I'm not okay with that. I've never been okay. What's next? A chip in my hand? Like, I'm not a Bible scholar, and I'm certainly not the most religious man on the planet. But I do know of the mark of the beast and the Book of Revelation, sort of, And again, I don't know that I'm really religious at all, because I've had a couple of things happen in my life that if there was a God, I'd like to speak to him face to face for a couple minutes, But it's interesting to think that there's a couple of books and different religions and that have sort of said there's a coming of something big. But there's also, if you look at it, it feels, and the reason why I kind of went with that Roman look as well was when I spoke to the guy that was doing the artwork, was that empire collapsed as well at some point. And it feels like that's where we are headed, to the collapse of an empire. And so in a very literal sense, there's also a kind of a war coming. That's what it feels like to me. So on every single front that you can think of, this to me made so much sense. And it was something I just stumbled across. I'm not by any means a Latin scholar or anything. I did some rudimentary Latin in high school, but it was only for 6 months or so. But I was just I'm always interested in finding new things out, and I was trying to find a cool phrase for the album title because I couldn't come up with one myself. I'd been trying to write things down, and I just happened to stumble across this website, and it was all these Latin sayings and phrases and where they came from. And I was just kind of scrolling through because I was like, yeah, some of it's interesting. And then I happened upon that and was like, oh, wow. And this was in March. So not even now in almost November, it's even more applicable to the situation we find ourselves in. Which is sad because it shouldn't be heading downhill. We should be returning back to where everybody can go outside, shake each other's hand, just you can wave to your neighbor, even if you don't like the neighbor. You can still be civil to the neighbor because you live next to each other. So I don't know. I think for me, and again, maybe that's because of when I turned 40, I have a completely different view on the world. But I'm no longer living in this very small bubble that includes a bus and a venue and a dressing room. And I never really was. But this I've been saying the social media thing for a long time. Even on the last album, which came out 4 years ago. And I wrote 5 years ago, I was already talking about how social media is going to become a very big problem, especially for teens and children, causing their depression rates to go up. I mean, social media has been used countless times to incite bullying on children, obviously, because that's how else they're going to do it bravely and anonymously. But and then that leads to kids' suicide. That leads to kids as young as 8 killing themselves, and I've heard even younger. It's like, and if you look at this and you created this, how could you feel good about yourself?
Yeah.
How do you feel? How do you sleep at night? Old whatever his name is, I don't even care. The guy, the Facebook guy. How does he sleep at night? Zuckerborg, as they call him, because everyone says he's an alien or a robot. But how does somebody like that have? Well, if you look at him, he doesn't seem like he has a soul, quite frankly. But
I mean,
if he did, let's argue that he had one. But how would you be able to look at yourself in the mirror and go, man, what I've created, sure, there's some good things that are coming out of it. And the list is getting smaller, by the way, of good versus bad. Certainly on a scope of life-changing events and what is serious. You could argue Facebook is a great networking tool. It's a great way to share photos, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. You can do that in an email. It's pretty simple. We've been doing that way before Facebook. What is so addictive about it and so destructive is the facade that everybody lives under. Or lives behind, certainly on things like Instagram, for example, where everyone is sucking in their stomachs and putting their chin in just the right angle and holding the camera at just the right and having just the right backdrop. And oh my God, my life is so fabulous. Meanwhile, it's not that fabulous. But you basically what Instagram is, it's driven on horny boys following girls with big butts, and then there's and there's occasionally the opposite way around too. But then there's people that offer nothing of value to the planet at all, as far as I'm concerned, except for what they were gifted by genetic makeup from their parents. And even then, most of them have had that sort of altered and sculpted, right? So it's not even real. For example, if you look at one of the Jenners, was Kylie Jenner, she doesn't even look the way she did.
I literally don't know.
My mind. What blows my mind is somebody who naturally, and you can look this up yourself, in 2015, for example, she had no lips. Now she's the biggest seller of lip gloss on the planet because of those things that she's had injected into her face. So what I'm saying is, it's just, I don't want my kid to grow up looking at that kind of a world and thinking that's the role models that's what she should aspire to be. It's like, I read a survey or a study where it was like, let's say 10 years ago, what was, if you ask kids what they wanted to be when they grow up, it would be, a police officer, fireman, a doctor, whatever. There would be a job. Now, for an overwhelmingly large number of kids will say, oh, I want to be Instagram famous. I want to be an influencer, which that word makes me want to vomit. But that's what's happening because they see maximum return for minimum effort. And there's this lack of appreciation for hard work and where it can get you. And I really hope that we can all as one start saying, okay, well, I don't want this in our lives anymore. The people that I know have got my phone number. The people that know me, they can text me or they can email me. I don't want anybody else to know. And even they don't know what I'm having for breakfast because they don't care. They don't know, what shoes I'm wearing today because they don't care. It's like in a real society and a real, I love how they say you have all these friends as well. And some of them, they obviously say followers, but it's not friends. It's not. Facebook, geez, I have a small group of friends. And I have all of their numbers on my phone. And I talk to them somewhat regularly, some more than others. But we are all sort of, we were all sort of massaged into thinking that this is what we need in our lives. And we've all just accepted it. And I think that's the first thing that leads to disaster is if you just accept something without questioning it, even when you see in front of you that it's destructive. You should be able to say, well, hey, it's like, hey, that pile of cocaine is going to kill you. Oh, okay, I guess I won't do it anymore. But hey, that platform is leading to your kid being bullied, which may then lead to self-harm, certainly depression, anxiety, and a whole bunch of other disorders. Okay, well, I'm going to stop that too. But we don't do that for some reason, because for some reason people just don't seem to want to acknowledge that these are really powerfully destructive things that are part of our lives now. And you have a choice to not be part of it if you don't want to, because really a lot of people will step away from social media and they'll also, man, I'm so much happier. I have no more stress, or certainly a lot less, because I'm not concerned about impressing other people, keeping other people happy, saying the right things to get the right kinds of responses. It's just, I just want to live me. I just want to be myself. I want to be able to live as I see fit, and treat other people with respect, and let them live the way they want to live, as long as it doesn't harm me or my family. And I think that there's less and less of that happening as well. So again, all of that falls under one big umbrella of, if you want peace, prepare for war, really, to me anyway. Because there's an ominous sort of feeling in the air for me. And I'm not some kind of doomsayer by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly doesn't feel like we're headed to a bunnies and butterflies territory. We're certainly heading into a far more dystopian, if you will, kind of looking future. And that's not, I mean, it just came out so quickly. You know what I mean? It's like there was so many, it's just like you would think that, well, if you're going to go real dramatic, it's an apocalyptic event is on its way. But you would think that it would be sort of more instant, and then it's, oh, well, we didn't see this coming. But we are literally watching something coming. We're seeing it in the distance, and we're just ignoring it. And it's kind of like, are we all really that self-destructive as humans that we don't recognize that the warning signs now beforehand and make the necessary changes to prevent a calamity, collapse? And it's terrifying that we all just sort of have this apathy towards it and go, oh, well, I mean, it's Facebook, I need it. I can't live without Twitter. Oh man, I have to see what so-and-so is doing on Instagram. And people are, I think there's like a disorder now where people have their heads down that there's certain spinal disorders now because of the way people are constantly on their phones. So yeah, I mean, I try to remain hopeful and positive, but it can be difficult at times,
Yeah. And there's so much, because I think we touched on this last time we talked, social media. And I just watched that documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've seen it, but
it's crazy. Yeah.
Talking about, and everything you've been talking about. And I took off like all the notifications from my phone, and pure bliss. Is it? Pure bliss, people. Yeah. I mean, after a while, but I did notice, I've done that. I did it a long time ago, but I did notice in my mental health. And I think that's why, because it's so much more subtle. Like, people don't realize how dangerous it is because it's more subtle, and we're still battling with teaching people that physical health and mental health and emotional health are all equally important. And social media it's a playground for war.
Right. And like you say, it's subtle. It's subconscious, and it's subtle, and it's very, very gently sort of seeping in, you know what I mean? But it's been so effective, and it's laid down such powerful roots at this point that many people wouldn't have the courage or the willpower to say, okay, I'm either getting rid of it, or like you did, turn off the notifications, or just maybe restrict yourself to 30 minutes of it a day, because people have a literal detox period. You know what I mean? Because it's a mental chemistry addiction. So you're getting all of this, and you're getting your fix from the rage that you feel all the time, which you somehow thrive on, or the happiness that you feel, or the self-importance that you feel. All of those things combined, and you take that all, and it's constantly, your brain is just pumping out all of these drugs into your system. And if you take that away, you're going to have a serious detox. And I think that's what's scary for people too. You either go, oh man, this is amazing, or you go, oh my God, I don't know what to do with myself. And there's been plenty of parodies about kids saying, oh, I can turn my phone off for a day. And then by, an hour in, they're losing their minds because they don't know what their friends are saying about them or whatever. But I think it takes a lot of willpower and a lot of courage to say, especially, for me, it was easier because I did this like a decade ago, maybe a little bit less, but especially in today where it's become more and more powerful and more integral in our daily lives. Now it's very, very difficult to say, you know what, I'm unplugging this and I'm out. But you've even seen the mental benefits of not having that constant sort of that tapping you on the shoulder, saying, hey man, check me out. Hey, somebody's doing this. Having that constant little, voice in your ear saying, ooh, I wonder what's going on out there. Because really, at the end of the day, how much of it means anything? If the really important stuff will come to your phone via a phone call or an email, or will happen to you in person. It's the other thing of when you go to a show, and if you come to a show and you hold up a phone and you watch the show through the phone, you aren't even there. You may as well stay at home and watch it on YouTube, because you are disengaging yourself emotionally from what's happening in front of you, because you've put the boob tube in the way. So now you've got, and I realized this years ago when I was trying to film something on my phone, and I really never use it for filming anything anymore at all, because I rather live in the moments rather than try and record them at the same time. Because if you're trying to record, say, my kid's doing a dance, sure, I could try and record it, but I'd rather see her do it, and because for me, that's the important engagement. But if you go to a rock show and you watch that through the screen, you're missing everything, because it's two-dimensional. You've shrunk it down to the shiny little rectangle in front of your eyes, whereas this is an entire 360 world around you that is having an experience together. And then here you are, like some sort of drone, staring through this screen, because you think when you upload it to YouTube, it's going to be the best one on YouTube. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's just a strange way to live. And I think, again, I have a phone. Any one of my friends will tell you I'm terrible at texting them back. I'm terrible at returning phone calls. I'm terrible at except for work emails. But it's because, usually I use it to watch YouTube, to try and learn things, to try and figure things out, sometimes just to veg out and not think about anything, especially when you're depressed. You'll be amazed at the types of things I find interesting when I'm completely down in the dumps. But I don't really use it for any kind of engagement socially, or because I think that should be. I don't like talking on the phone either. I like to talk to people in person. And that's also rare. But yeah, I just think that it's been very subtle. It's been very sneaky. It's been an incredibly successful operation that's happened. And now, whereas 20 years ago we had a phone and you had to tap out you had to get to the letter, then you have to wait. We've gone from that to having these things that could probably launch a shuttle into space at this point. And yet we use it mostly for yelling at each other instead of like trying to learn. It's like, I can't tell you how many times somebody will say, hey, I wonder if what such and such is, I wonder how much fuel, let's go back, a space rocket burns. I'm like, I guess I'll look it up for you, and I'll pull up my phone. I'll look, because it's people that don't even realize that there's more to this technology than just, okay, oh, I got to say something now. I got to be, inflammatory and really piss this person off. No, you can use it for good. It's like, that's like, or at least for knowledge, because you have unlimited access to all the knowledge on the internet right now, for the most part. There are free MIT courses you could do. There, engineering. Crazy algebra. There's so many subjects that I don't have any interest in. But if you felt like getting into it, you could get into it because it's free and it's available and there's so much knowledge. But no. I want to be famous on Instagram. Check out my butt. It's like that's the world we live in now. And it's sad that what I feel, you're creative, I'm creative, and there are still some creative people left, but it seems like more and more the people that create are the ones that see the world, I think, slightly differently, and usually have some kind of inner turmoil. Like, for example, the sort of adage that comedians are normally very depressed, unhappy people because they want to make you laugh so they can hide behind that wall. And that's true from almost every comedian that I follow will tell you the same thing. But then these other people but at least they're trying to contribute we're trying to leave something behind or make somebody feel better, right? So there's a purpose to what we do. There's a driving force behind it. Somebody who's a doctor, obviously we know what they give to society. Somebody that's a teacher, somebody that's a police officer, somebody that's, a bus driver, anybody, they all somehow contribute. Who doesn't contribute is the person taking photos of themselves to get product placement and get money from big companies to get, just to sell to other people. That doesn't contribute to society at all. And I really hope that we see a downward trend, and we certainly see just a mass realization of how destructive all of this is, and really how meaningless it is at the end of the. Nobody is going to remember a Kardashian 25, 30 years from now. Nobody will. Nobody's going to remember. I don't know anybody else, honestly. Those are the only ones I know, because I don't want to get eyeball cancer by looking at this stuff. But I just don't think that they're gonna leave any kind of substantial mark on sure, pop culture, but pop culture has become something that is it's quite dumbed down, I think, from what it used to be. I think pop culture used to include a lot more interesting things. Just go back a few decades, and you had guys like you had artists that were Andy Warhol, for example. You had musicians. You had authors that were pop culture icons, and like the Capote and those kinds of guys. But there was kind of like this. It was a crazy time, but they would have been the people that I look up to. There's not many people I look up to now in the pop culture as we see it. There's nobody that I'm like, oh damn, that's a great. There's authors that I read, and there's musicians that I listen to, and there's movies that I watch, and actors and actresses that I watch. But there's nobody that I look up to and aspire to be like. You know what I mean? And that's a sad thing. I wish there were more people with these kinds of creative platforms that were being more influential, or that the kids and the youth were like, oh man, that's really cool. I want to go in that direction. Screw Instagram. I would much rather do something beautiful or creative or emotional or even instructive, just something that helps out, that even if it's the one person next to you, if it's helpful to them, that would be great. But it doesn't seem like that's the case anymore,
I hope people really, really take that in, because I think you've just imparted so much wisdom and possibility and hope into that. And I know I want to honor your time, because I know you're so busy. But I would love to just ask you one last question, if that's all right.
Okay.
What intention would you like to spark for the rest of the year?
Intention for myself?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to start being better to myself. I'd like to be kinder to myself. I've never been somebody that's had, in my entire life, had very high self-esteem. But I've also never really ever paid too much. If there's a room full of people, let's say there's 3 people in this house, and there's an emotional reservoir that I have, it gets expended on them before me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So to realize that it's okay to just dip in there and expend some of myself, that's something that I'm learning to do. I'm learning that you don't always, sometimes you can't make other people happy if you yourself are completely miserable. I mean, you can try, and you can go through the motions, and you can play the roles that you're supposed to play. But, inside it's still an issue of, I'm slowly fading away in a sense. Yeah. And there's less and less of me, and more of an imposter. And I don't want to see that dwindle to nothing. And then really what's left is a husk of what I used to be. Mm-hmm. And the first thing, and I'm going through this in therapy as well, is that it's really just to be kind to yourself and say, okay, you do deserve some things. You're not the world's worst human being. You're not mm-hmm. the most useless thing on the planet. You're not, I'll say that's basically, I guess, what my goal is, and how achievable that is really up to the effort I'll put into it. And if nothing's easy, nothing that's powerful and meaningful comes easily, I don't believe. If it did, we'd all be super happy, super rich. we'd be flying cars, for God's sake. But I think that it's going to take a lot of work, because I have to undo 41 years of knee-jerk responses, reflexive actions, the way I perceive something that's being said to me. I always take it personally, and I'm trying to get away from that as well and realize that I'm just being told something that isn't subconsciously saying I'm a piece of crap. But you see, I had a pretty interesting childhood. So all of this, the way I see myself and the way I respond to things and the way I react, physically, my physical, like the anxiety and the panic and the shaking, all of that comes from being raised by a mother who's a terrible human being and instilled in me from such a young age that I was always at fault, that everything that happened that was wrong was somehow my fault. And even if I was upset about something that she had done to me, I would be treated as if it was my fault. I would be given silent treatment until I eventually went up and apologized for making her feel bad because I felt bad because of what she. So, let's just say, for example, she decided not to pick me up from school, and I would get up. This was a boarding school, by the way. We lived about two, three, maybe a mile from the school. But my mother was too interested in sort of sleeping around town and boozing it up with men that these two little boys of hers, they just get in the way. So she sent us to boarding school. And it was a Friday, for example, where she promised she would pick us up. And we would get out of this boarding school. I mean, we were in a boarding school. We were terrified. We would wet the bed because we were on purpose, because we were too terrified to go to the bathroom because they told us there were ghosts bouncing their heads around in the bathroom. And I was like, so my brother and I would just lie there and like piss ourselves. And then we did that. We were in boarding school for about 4 or 5 months. The first term of the year, so about 4 months. There was one of the most awful times of my life, and the full stop, the big exclamation point of that was when it was a couple of times, not just once. It was numerous times actually, where we were promised she was going to pick us up on the Friday afternoon. We would sit there until it got dark outside, and she just wouldn't show up. So my brother and I would go back inside, and we were stuck there for the weekend. There were times when when she did pick us up. Then she would drop us off. She had a choice. She could drop us off on Sunday evening or Monday morning. And the amount of crying and pleading and begging we had to do for her to let us stay the Sunday night, just the Sunday night. I think we were successful twice out of the, let's say, 20-something, maybe 15, 16 weekends. But then if you're upset about it, somehow it's your fault because she didn't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? So my goal is to understand that all of those behaviors, but also all of the thoughts and the ideas that were sort of crammed down my throat were not mine. They were hers, and I wasn't old enough to understand that. So in the formative years of my life, I was raised by one of the worst human beings on the planet, and I'm now trying to undo all that damage. And you don't understand that there's been this damage because you just sort of accept it. But there was so much done, and there's so many things I could tell you about, so many instances that you wouldn't believe me. Eventually you'd be like, no, you're just making this up. But so many things that I'm only now starting to chip away at them, and it's going to take me a long time. And the therapy I go to is very, very difficult. It's like emotionally, it drains me. Yeah. But I know at the end of each, and the guy said to me, he's like, if you like coming to see me, then I'm not doing my job. And I said, okay, well, let's give this a shot. And it's one of the guys. And he was right, because, there'll be some days when I'm done and I have no energy because of the experiences I have to relive, and rewiring and reprogramming my thinking processes. And he's asking me, well, look at it from this angle, from that angle. So it's a really, really hard thing to do, but that's what I'm trying to steer towards is that when my irrational responses, which are, my defensive response is an offensive response. Mm-hmm. So, but I need to even understand that sometimes the defensive response doesn't even have to be there because I'm not being attacked, but I always feel like, I'm the guy that walks through the mall and thinks everyone's laughing at him. You know what I mean? That's how I've been my whole life. So I'm trying to undo all of these kinds of behaviors and these thought processes. So that's my goal is to be better to myself and really sort of work really hard at altering my behavioral patterns that lean heavily negatively because of I had no choice as a kid. And it's not just for myself. It's for my family too, because I've learned a lot about myself just from this therapy, and some of it is stuff that I'd never thought of before, and I'd never actually looked at it from a different angle, and others of it makes a lot of sense. But it's been really, really interesting. I'm really grateful for it. I'm really grateful that I'm with somebody who's helping me understand myself for the first time in my entire life. And the more I do that, and then you have to practice those techniques that you get taught, the tools again, the weapons that'll help you defeat these kinds of anxieties and it's just your responses that are negative. So yeah, that's my goal for the rest of this year, and certainly well on until my old age. But I've started it, so we'll see how it goes. I mean, I've been going for a while, to be honest. I was actually going quite regularly before we were all shut down, and there was kind of a break there. And in that break, it was really bad for me. You know what I mean? As difficult as it is to do the therapy, it was a weekly sort of. I wouldn't say highlight because it's not fun, but it was a weekly lifeline. And then when it was gone for a month, 2 months, 3 months, now 6 now, only now recently restarted. So it was gone for like 7 months, maybe 8 months. Yeah, that was brutal. So because you almost undo everything. You remember some of it and you retain some of it, but everything kind of falls apart again because you don't have that weekly analysis to help steer you in the right direction again, keep your mind in a good spot, So that's the goal.
I love that. And that resonates so much because I think anybody with abusive parents knows that feeling of what that's like. And I'm so glad that you're learning how to reprogram. It just takes time. I mean, it takes so much time, and it's not like it's ever done, but it just takes, it takes time for our subconscious to catch up. Consciously, we can know everything that we need to know. That's like, no, I'm good. Like, no, that's not a true thought, blah, 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 blah. Right. But subconsciously, there's still a little chitter back there that's like,
Yeah.
But Shaun, thank you so much for being on the podcast again. This was so powerful, and I'm just so grateful that you came back for another episode.
I appreciate you having me. I know I rambled a bit, but
no.
Yeah, I'm glad we did this again. Maybe we'll do it again next time you don't have a guest and you need somebody.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Anytime you want, you've got a spot.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being with me on today's episode of Spark Intention. I hope you all got something out of this episode. If so, let me know on the gram. Tag me, tag your best friend, your cat, your mom, your dog, whoever you think would get value out of this episode. Let me know your thoughts, and if you loved this episode and feel so moved, head on over to iTunes and leave a comment in the review section. Your feedback means the world to me, and it's how I get to know you and what you want to hear more or less of on this podcast. So until next time, keep feeding your intentions towards success, and I will see you soon. Take care.